Lily, $100 a month for groceries should be more than enough. If you can't make that happen, we'll just call it quits. Matt's words hung in the air like a bad smell. I stared at him, feeling a cold disbelief wash over me. You've got to be kidding me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No joke. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug smile playing at his lips. Prove you're not that useless, Lily, or we're done. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. This was the man I'd married? My husband of 5 years? I took a deep breath, the anger coursing through me like wildfire. Fine, I said, finally managing to speak. I'll do it. Matt shrugged as if it were no big deal. Good luck with that, he said, already turning his attention back to his laptop. I walked to the kitchen, his words echoing in my head. Useless. The man who used to praise my cooking, who loved every meal I put on our table, now reduced me to this? I grabbed a notepad and started jotting down meal ideas, my mind racing with determination. That night, as I lay in bed beside Matt, I stared at the ceiling. He was already asleep, completely unbothered by his cruel ultimatum. I replayed our conversation, every word a dagger to my heart, and something inside me shifted. This challenge wasn't just about groceries. It was a test of my worth, a value he'd callously questioned. I wasn't going to let him win. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the store with my notebook in hand. I had a list, carefully planned out to stretch every dollar. As I walked through the aisles, I felt a strange mix of rage and resolve fueling my steps. I'll show him, I muttered under my breath, reaching for the discounted vegetables. By the time I returned home, I was exhausted but determined. I pulled out my phone and started filming. Hey everyone, it's Lily. Today we're tackling an impossible challenge, a month's worth of groceries on $100. As I chopped and cooked, I felt the knot in my chest begin to ease. The camera became my confidant. I shared recipes, tips, and tricks, pouring my heart into every post. The notifications soon started to ping. Comments, likes, new followers, total strangers cheering me on in this absurd quest. When Matt walked into the kitchen that evening, I was plating dinner. Smells good, he said, eyeing the meal with a rare hint of approval. I didn't answer. I was too fired up, too focused on proving him wrong through every flavorful bite. As days turned into weeks, my online community grew. Each meal I managed under the budget felt like a victory, not just over Matt's challenge, but over his belittling judgment. The more successful I became online, the more I realized how much I had let myself be defined by his cruel standards. And so, with each dish and every supportive comment from my newfound followers, I built my own fortress of resilience, one recipe at a time. It wasn't just about saving money anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth, about showing Matt, and more importantly myself, that I was far from useless. Sitting at the kitchen table, I flipped through an old photo album. The early days with Matt. Smiles, laughter, shared dreams. My fingers traced our wedding picture, pausing as the memories flooded in. It's hard to believe we were so happy once, I murmured to myself. Our first date had been at a small Italian restaurant. Matt had been charming, attentive, hanging on to my every word. You have an amazing smile, Lily, he had said, eyes twinkling under the dim lights. I had blushed, feeling special and truly seen. Thank you, Matt. I really like you, I had replied, shy but excited about the possibilities. Back then, he appreciated everything I did at home. This lasagna is incredible, Lily. You spoil me, he'd say, wrapping me in a warm embrace. Those moments felt distant now, like scenes from a movie that had long since ended. I shook off the nostalgia and stared at my camera. My growing hobby on social media had become my refuge. Hey everyone, it's Lily again. Today I'm sharing my favorite lasagna recipe, affordable and delicious, I said, starting the recording. Cooking had always been my joy, and sharing it on social media was a way to reclaim a piece of myself. As I cooked, memories of Matt and me laughing in the kitchen played in my mind. He used to help me chop vegetables, sneaking kisses in between. But that laughter had been replaced by his cold eyes and harsh words. Scrolling through old photos, one caught my eye. It was a candid shot of me, giggling as Matt tried to flip a pancake. The warmth of those days, the sincerity in his laughter, where had it gone? My phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. A notification, more followers, more support. Cooking for strangers who valued my tips more than Matt had in years felt strange, yet rewarding. Each comment cheered me on. "You're amazing, Lily. These recipes saved me so much." While my social media presence blossomed, Matt became more distant. He spent late hours at work, giving me a generic apology when he bothered to offer one. "Sorry, Lily. Big project. You understand," he'd say, dismissively planting a kiss on my forehead before retreating to his phone. With cooking videos and the supportive online community, I found myself less concerned about Matt's coldness. I replied to comments like I was catching up with old friends. "Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the recipe." One afternoon, I set up my camera for another video when an idea struck me. I opened the fridge and checked its sparse contents. "Let's make something amazing with what we've got. Watch how we turn these scraps into a feast," I declared, hitting record. It was both a challenge and a defiance against Matt's cruel test. That night, as I set the table with a humble but delicious dinner, I waited for Matt's reaction. "This looks good," he said grudgingly, eyes not meeting mine. The praise felt hollow, almost mocking, but inside, I knew I was more than his cruel words. With every dish I shared, with every follower gained, I rebuilt my confidence. Matt would come home later and later, and the man in those happy photos felt like a stranger. But I found solace in my own growth and the strength I never knew I had. We used to laugh together, dream together. Now, our home was silent except for the click of my camera and the buzz of notifications, the world cheering on a woman determined to rise above betrayal. It started slow at first. Matt's missed dinners, the cold shoulder, the excuses wrapped in important business meetings. I would wait at the table, the meals I worked hard on growing cold. Frustration bubbled under my skin. One night, he walked in well past midnight, the scent of perfume lingering around him. I sat on the couch, the dim light from the TV casting shadows across his face. "Late again," I noted aloud, not even trying to mask the bitterness. "Work, Lily. You know how it is," he replied curtly, not even offering an apology this time. I watched him walk to the bedroom, anger twisting in my gut. Resolute, I logged into my social media accounts instead. The numbers had climbed again, more followers, more engagement, people genuinely interested in my recipes, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. "Hang in there, you're doing amazing, Lily," one follower commented, lifting my spirits in small yet meaningful ways. As Matt's absences grew more frequent, I threw myself deeper into my content. Each meal, each new recipe shared became my silent rebellion. It was more than cooking, it was proof of my worth. I filmed everything, from budget-friendly gourmet meals to heartfelt kitchen hacks. The community's love and support started filling the void Matt left. "Hey guys, today we're making a $5 feast," I said into the camera, a determined smile on my face. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Each new like and comment validating my efforts, but the doubts still gnawed at me. One afternoon, as I chopped vegetables for a new video, I broached the subject that had been on my mind. As Matt walked in the door, I turned to face him. "Matt, have you thought about starting a family?" I asked, voice steady though my heart raced. He looked at me like I had just suggested the most ridiculous thing imaginable. "A family, Lily? We can barely manage as it is. What makes you think we're ready for that?" His words were sharp, cutting deeper than the knife in my hand. "Is it really about that, or are you just not interested?" I pressed, needing to hear the truth. "Don't start with this now. I'm too tired for your nonsense," he snapped, brushing past me again. The sting of his rejection settled deep. With Matt coming home less and less, the house felt empty. His coldness was a stark contrast to the warmth and excitement I found online. It became routine, his late nights, my growing channel. I knew something wasn't right, but I also knew I needed more than his disdain. I kept filming and posting, each video a small victory. As my small success started to translate into brand deals, I felt the tide turning. The nights Matt spent away from home only fueled my drive. Despite the pain and isolation, I found comfort in the screen's glow, a beacon of hope and validation. Little did Matt know, his neglect and cruelty were pushing me toward something stronger. His distance gave me room to grow, to prepare for what was coming next. With every new follower and every night spent alone, I found resilience I never knew I had. I was on the brink of uncovering Matt's true nature, and when I did, he'd see just how strong I had become. Another day, another challenge. This would be the third week since Matt dropped the bomb with his ultimatum, and my spirits were oddly high. The $100 grocery budget had become my battlefield, and I was winning. I prowled the aisles of the supermarket looking for deals, comparing prices. People might say it's impossible, but I'd managed to stretch every dollar. I picked up a pack of chicken thighs, discounted and perfect for multiple meals. When I returned home, I set up my camera. Hey everyone, today we're making 3 meals out of this pack of chicken. Can we do it? Of course we can. I began filming with a confidence that felt almost strange, yet very real. As my audience cheered in the comments, Matt's absence became a dull ache in the back of my mind. His late nights continued, his presence at home minimal. I moved around the kitchen like an artist in her studio, every chop of the knife a brushstroke against the canvas of betrayal he had painted. Matt stumbled through the door later that night. I was on the couch, answering messages from my followers. He walked into the kitchen, looking around for the meal I'd prepared. "Where's dinner?" he asked, voice gruff from what I guessed was another night out. "In the fridge. I saved you a plate," I replied without looking up. He grumbled as he heated it up. "You know, this budget thing isn't going to work forever," he said between bites, his tone laced with condescension. "Maybe not," I replied calmly, typing another response on my phone. "But I'm making it work now." At the end of the month, I reviewed our expenses. I had done it. I proved him wrong. I filmed a special video to mark the achievement. "Hey everyone, guess what? We've completed an entire month on a $100 grocery budget, thanks to all your support." My followers' encouraging comments poured in. Matt's reaction, however, was as heartless as ever. "So you did it. Big deal. Don't expect a medal," he said, tossing the statement carelessly over his shoulder. Frustration bubbled up, but I swallowed it down, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Instead, I poured all of it into my cooking. Every critique from Matt was met with another video, another shared recipe. The tension in the house was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Our conversations were limited to basics, a flimsy facade of normalcy. Meanwhile, my social media presence grew stronger each day. Fans eagerly awaited my posts, and engagement skyrocketed. One evening, while editing a new video, I heard Matt on the phone in the next room. His voice was low and secretive. "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow night. Same place." I paused, the words hanging in the air. A cold realization began to form. It wasn't just work keeping him away. My hands shook as I continued editing, playing the dutiful wife while pieces of a darker puzzle slowly clicked into place. The $100 challenge had come and gone, but something far more challenging was on the horizon. But first, I needed proof. Proof that he was the vile and manipulative man I was beginning to see clearly. From that moment on, every step, every meal, every message to my followers became more than just a hobby. It was preparation for a showdown I knew was inevitable. And I would be ready. Mark my words. I would be ready. I was unloading groceries when I heard Matt's voice from the living room. He was on the phone again, talking in that hushed tone he'd adopted lately. This time, I was determined to catch every word. "No, Lily doesn't suspect a thing," he said, a disgusting smirk in his voice. "Meeting you is the only thing keeping me sane right now." My heart hammered in my chest. I crept closer, hiding behind the kitchen door. "Don't worry, Taylor. Friday night is ours. She thinks it's another late meeting." I felt the blood drain from my face. Matt was having an affair. My body moved on autopilot, arranging groceries while my mind raced. I needed proof. Later that night, lying next to the man betraying me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his deceit. But instead of falling apart, I felt a steely resolve harden within me. I reached out to my growing community online for the strength to follow through. The next day, I called a private investigator. "I need your help," I said, clutching the phone tight. "I think my husband is cheating on me." "Let's meet. I can discuss what we'll need to do," he responded, his voice firm yet kind. After our meeting, the investigator began his work while I threw myself back into my cooking videos. On social media, I smiled and shared, all while piecing together the destruction Matt was bringing into our lives. As I documented recipes, the investigator gave me regular updates. "He's definitely involved with someone named Taylor. They've been meeting at the same hotel every Friday night," he informed me one evening. It stung, but I kept calm. "Thank you. Keep digging," I replied. determination underscoring every word. The evidence piled up quickly. Photos of Matt with Taylor, incriminating text messages, receipts for lavish dinners and gifts. It was sickening. Each new piece of information was both a dagger to my heart and a nail in his coffin. On the Friday of their next rendezvous, I put on my dinner table smile as Matt prepared to leave. "Big project tonight?" I asked sweetly. "Yeah, don't wait up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Of course. Good luck," I replied, feigning innocence. Once he was gone, I sat down with the evidence, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, betrayal, and something else, relief. His demand for the $100 grocery budget, his absence, his coldness. It all made sense now. I stared at the pile of proof before me. The private investigator had even gathered videos, Matt laughing intimately with Taylor, looking at her the way he used to look at me. The anger simmered, but I held it back. The next morning, I confronted Matt. Evidence spread out on the table. "Care to explain this?" I asked, voice steady but cold. His face went pale, eyes widening as he took in the photos and texts. "It's not what it looks like." "Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "I know everything. About Taylor, about the money you've been wasting on this affair. You thought making me stretch $100 would distract me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The shock, the guilt, the realization of what he'd done, it was all written on his face. "From now on, you're on your own," I said, packing the evidence into a folder. "I'll be talking to a lawyer. We're done, Matt." As I walked away, I felt lighter, stronger. Out of Matt's betrayal, I had found my own power. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, the weight of what I'd uncovered giving me no rest. But today was different. Today wasn't about waiting. It was about action. As Matt stumbled into the kitchen, barely awake, he didn't even glance at me. "Where's my breakfast?" he growled, his usual demands cutting through the silence. I met his eyes with an icy stare. "You want something to eat?" I tossed a crumpled $2 bill on the table. "Here's $2. Get yourself some cheap junk. Figure the rest out yourself." He froze, confusion and anger flashing across his face. "What do you mean? This is ridiculous." I didn't flinch. "Ridiculous? You think your affair is ridiculous? I know everything, Matt. Taylor, the hotels, the money you've wasted." I threw the folder of evidence onto the table, its contents spilling out. His face turned a sickly pale. "Lily, I can explain." "No, you can't." I kept my voice firm, every word a blow to his crumbling facade. "You pushed me to prove my worth. You tested me. Now it's my turn." I watched him scramble to find words, any words, but there was nothing left to say. I reveled in the silence, then turned and walked away, leaving him amidst the evidence of his betrayal. Once I was out of the house, I called my lawyer. "I need to file for divorce, and I want to make sure he pays for what he's done." My lawyer, Sarah, didn't miss a beat. "Gather all financial records, any proof of infidelity, anything that shows misconduct. We'll make sure he gets what he deserves." Armed with her guidance and my newfound determination, I dove into preparing my case. At the same time, my social media following was buzzing. Subtly, I started sharing snippets of my story without mentioning Matt directly. Sometimes, life throws challenges that test our strength. I posted alongside a photo of a simple yet elegant meal. The comments overflowed with support, my online community rallying around me in ways I'd never expected. Each day, I became more focused. Sarah and I met regularly, carefully piecing together the case that would ensure justice. Meanwhile, Matt's attempts at reconciliation became more desperate. "Lily, can we talk?" he pleaded one evening, blocking my path in the hallway. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, pushing past him with a cold stare. His workplace caught wind of his affair soon after. Whispers and side glances followed him in the office. Taylor, now exposed, tried to keep her distance, leaving him more alone than ever. As my cooking brand continued to rise, I felt the tide shifting. My focus wasn't revenge for its own sake. It was reclaiming my life, my worth. I plunged into new projects, developing recipes, and making plans for a future without Matt. On the day of our court hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Sarah by my side. Matt looked gaunt, defeated. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judgment was swift. He would pay dearly, financially through alimony and socially as his reputation lay in tatters. As we exited the courtroom, Sarah turned to me, her smile filled with genuine warmth. "You did it." I nodded, a weight lifting off my shoulders. This is just the beginning. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was the freedom from years of deceit and manipulation. But the journey wasn't over. Matt's world was only beginning to crumble. The first crack appeared when Taylor publicly distanced herself from him. Word of their affair spread like wildfire in his professional circles. "I can't be associated with this mess," she told him during their last clandestine meeting, which ironically wasn't so clandestine anymore. The private investigator had made sure those images surfaced at just the right time. Matt staggered into the house late that evening, a shadow of his former self. "Lily, please. Can we talk?" His voice was strained, desperate. I glanced at him with detached indifference. "We have nothing left to discuss. You made sure of that." He tried to approach, but I stepped back, a barrier he couldn't cross. He was imploding, and for the first time I felt nothing but a cold, distant satisfaction. That night, I posted a new video, my mind whirling with new ideas. "Hey everyone, today's recipe is all about fresh starts and new beginnings. Let's make something amazing." The community's responses poured in, each comment a brick in the new foundation I was building. Meanwhile, Matt's downfall accelerated. News of his affair leaked to his boss. The company couldn't risk the scandal. He was summoned to a meeting and returned home with a cardboard box filled with his desk's remnants. "I lost my job, Lily," he muttered, helplessly dropping the box by the door. "Not my problem," I said, not even bothering to look up from my laptop. I was deep into planning my next online event, a cooking class live stream that was already attracting sponsors. Days turned into weeks, each one worse for Matt. Without his job, his income plummeted. The judgment from the court added a financial strain he couldn't handle alone. His so-called friends vanished, each slipping away to avoid the mess he had become. One evening, sipping coffee in my new favorite cafe, I received an email. My first cookbook was officially published and ready for pre-order. I could hardly contain my excitement. I shared the news with my followers, the comments overflowing with encouragement and pride. Returning home, I found Matt rummaging through old bills, his despair palpable. "I don't know how to fix this, Lily," he said, tears brimming in his eyes. "That's your mess to clean up," I replied coolly. "You brought this on yourself." Watching him unravel was a stark reminder of the man he truly was, a man who tried to break me but ended up shattering himself. I felt a strange sense of closure. Moving forward, I immersed myself in new projects, cooking segments, sponsorship deals, and community events. Each success was mine alone, a testament to my resilience. Matt moved out a month later, defeated and broken. The house, now silent without his toxicity, became my sanctuary. I redecorated, shifting from old memories to new aspirations. From the ashes of betrayal, a stronger me had emerged. With my growing brand and supportive followers, I was ready to embrace a future untethered from the past. My story wasn't about revenge or loss anymore. It was about rebirth, a new chapter waiting to be written. The first morning in my new apartment was surreal. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the minimalist furniture I'd carefully chosen. The space felt fresh, free from the shadows of the past. I brewed a cup of coffee and took a deep breath. The air smelled like potential, like new beginnings. With my recipe book published and my social media thriving, today marked the start of something beautiful. I sat down at my kitchen counter, scrolling through messages from followers. "Congratulations on the new book, Lily. Can't wait to try the recipes." Each comment felt like a step farther from my old life. As the day progressed, I finalized details for a cooking event, a live class that had drawn considerable interest. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a reminder that I was building something all on my own. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was a delivery, a bouquet of vibrant sunflowers with a note, "To new beginnings. With love, your fans." I smiled, placing the flowers on the table. Their brightness mirrored my newfound optimism. Later, preparing for the live stream, I couldn't help but think of how far I'd come. The screen blinked to life and hundreds of faces filled the grid, each one eager to learn from me. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're making a special recipe from my new book. It's all about transformation, taking simple ingredients and turning them into something extraordinary, I began, the excitement in my voice matched by the enthusiasm in the comments. The interaction was electric, each step met with applause, each tip eagerly absorbed. I felt a deep connection, a shared journey of resilience and growth. By the end, the chat was filled with praise and gratitude. "Thank you, Lily. You've inspired us so much," one comment said. "No, thank you," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "You've all been my strength." After the class, I settled into the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on the path that led me here. The old life with Matt felt like a distant memory, a heavy coat I had finally shrugged off. A few days later, I heard through mutual friends that Matt was struggling. His new job was low-paying, and Taylor had left him after realizing he couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted. There was no satisfaction in his misery, only a reminder of what I'd escaped. I poured my energy into new projects, expanding my cooking brand, planning future books, and engaging more deeply with my online community. Each venture was a brick in the sturdy foundation of my new life. One evening, as I signed copies of my book at a local bookstore, a woman approached me. "Lily, your journey has been so inspiring. You gave me the courage to leave my own toxic relationship." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you. It means the world to hear that. We all have the strength to rebuild, even when it feels impossible." As I returned to my apartment that night, the city lights twinkling outside, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman's words lingered in my mind, solidifying my purpose. Revenge had given way to something much more fulfilling: empowerment, growth, and the unwavering belief that I could forge my own path. My past with Matt was a chapter closed, and I was ready to write the rest of my story, one filled with hope, resilience, and endless possibilities. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding, and every muscle in my body ached. As I tried to sit up, a wave of nausea swept over me, and I collapsed back onto the bed, shivering uncontrollably. "Elena, get up and clean this mess." Clayton's voice boomed from the living room. "I swear, you're just lazy. Can't even manage simple tasks while I'm at work." I dragged myself out of bed, my legs barely supporting my weight, and stumbled into the living room. Clayton was glaring at me, his eyes narrowed with disgust. The room was a mess, with dirty dishes piled in the sink and laundry scattered across the floor. "I'm sorry," I croaked, my throat raw and scratchy. "I've been feeling really sick." Before I could finish my sentence, Clayton cut me off. "That's no excuse. You're just lazy and unmotivated. I work all day to provide for us, and you can't even keep the house clean." His words stung, but I was too weak to argue. I tried to explain that I had a high fever and could barely stand, but he wasn't listening. He just kept berating me, his voice growing louder and more aggressive with each word. Suddenly, everything started spinning, and I felt myself falling. The last thing I heard was Clayton's voice, distant and distorted, before everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the couch, a damp cloth on my forehead. Clayton was nowhere to be seen. As I tried to piece together what had happened, the memories came flooding back. The sickness, the mess, the yelling, and then the darkness. It wasn't the first time Clayton had lashed out at me like that. Over the past year, his behavior had become increasingly erratic and abusive. The man I had fallen in love with, kind, caring, and supportive, had been slowly replaced by someone I barely recognized. I thought back to the early days of our relationship when we couldn't get enough of each other. We had met in college, and from the moment we locked eyes, it was like we were the only two people in the world. We were inseparable, spending every waking moment together, talking about our hopes and dreams for the future. After graduation, we got married, and everything seemed perfect. We had good jobs, a nice apartment, and a love that felt unbreakable. But then, slowly but surely, things started to change. Clayton became more distant, more critical, and more controlling. He would pick apart everything I did, finding fault in even the smallest tasks. Nothing was ever good enough for him. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always brushed it off or turned it around on me. "You're just too sensitive," he would say. "I'm only trying to help you improve." But it wasn't just the criticism. There was a darkness in him that I had never seen before, a rage that simmered just beneath the surface. He would lash out over the smallest things, and his words cut deeper than any knife. As I lay on the couch, my body aching and my heart heavy, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, walking on eggshells, afraid of the next outburst. I had to find a way out, before it was too late. After my fainting spell, I couldn't stop thinking about how my life had taken such a dark turn. As I recovered in bed, memories of the early days with Clayton flooded my mind. The laughter, the joy, the unwavering support we had for each other. But those golden moments seemed like a lifetime ago, tarnished by the harsh reality of who he had become. I remembered the first time I saw a glimpse of his true nature. It was a few months after our wedding, and we were having a small get-together with friends. Clayton got into a heated argument with one of the guys over some trivial matter, and his face contorted into an expression of pure rage. His eyes were wild, his veins bulging, and for a moment I didn't even recognize him. After our friends left, I tried to talk to him about it, but he brushed it off as nothing. "Don't be so sensitive," he said, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. But the incidents kept happening, and the mask he wore began to slip more and more. The verbal jabs became more frequent, the criticisms more biting. He would find fault in everything I did, no matter how hard I tried. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, he came up behind me and started berating me for the way I was chopping the vegetables. "Can't you do anything right?" he spat, his words dripping with venom. I was so taken aback that I dropped the knife, narrowly missing my foot. Clayton just laughed, as if it were all some big joke. That's when I remembered the warning signs I had ignored from his ex-girlfriend, Emily. She had tried to tell me about his volatile temper and controlling behavior, but I brushed it off, convinced that he had changed. "He's not the same person he was with me," I had told her, my voice brimming with naive optimism. But Emily saw through his facade. "Believe me, that's just an act," she had cautioned. "The real Clayton will show his true colors eventually." How right she was. As I lay in bed replaying those memories, something inside me shifted. A fire ignited, a determination to take back control of my life. I couldn't continue living in fear, walking on eggshells, waiting for the next outburst. I knew that leaving him wouldn't be easy. Clayton had a way of making me feel small, worthless, as if I couldn't survive without him. But I had to try. For my own sanity, for my own safety, I had to break free from his toxic grip. From that moment on, I started documenting everything. Every insult, every criticism, every act of aggression, no matter how small. I kept a detailed journal, recording dates, times, and specific incidents, building a case against him. Whenever he berated me for not doing enough around the house, I would calmly remind him that I worked just as many hours as he did. When he accused me of being lazy or unmotivated, I would list out all the tasks I had accomplished that day, refusing to let him diminish my efforts. It was a daily battle, but I was determined to stand my ground. I started making plans, researching my options, and reaching out to friends and family for support. I knew that leaving him wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As I looked back on the person I had become, meek, submissive, a shell of my former self, I felt a surge of resolve. No more. I was done being a victim. It was time to take back control and reclaim the life that was rightfully mine. The days that followed were a constant battle, a tug-of-war between my newfound determination and Clayton's relentless belittling. Every morning I would wake up with a sense of dread, wondering what fresh hell awaited me. Despite working long shifts at the hospital, I was still expected to maintain a spotless home and have dinner ready the moment Clayton walked through the door. If anything was out of place or not up to his impossible standards, the verbal onslaught would begin. "What have you been doing all day?" he would snarl, kicking off his shoes and leaving them in the middle of the living room floor. "This place is a pigsty." I would calmly explain that I had just finished a 12-hour shift, but he would dismiss my explanations with a wave of his hand. "Excuses, excuses. That's all I ever hear from you." No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for him. The laundry wasn't folded to his liking, the dishes weren't cleaned properly, the floors weren't shining bright enough. He would nitpick and criticize every little thing, his voice dripping with contempt. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, I came home to find Clayton pacing around the living room, his face flushed with anger. "Where the hell have you been?" he spat as soon as I walked through the door. "I told you, I had to work late," I replied, too exhausted to argue. There was an emergency, and we were short-staffed. "Oh, that's convenient," he sneered. "You're always working late, aren't you? Or are you just out gallivanting with other men?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Clayton, that's not fair. You know I would never." Before I could finish, he cut me off with a harsh slap across the face. The force of the blow knocked me backwards, and I stumbled, clutching my stinging cheek. "Don't you dare talk back to me," he roared, his eyes wild with rage. "I'm the one who brings home the money, and you ungrateful bitch better show some respect." I stood there, stunned, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't the first time he had hit me, but it never got any easier. Each blow chipped away at my self-worth, leaving me feeling smaller and more worthless than before. As Clayton stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs. I knew I had to get out, but the thought of leaving filled me with terror. Where would I go? How would I support myself? But then I remembered the journal I had been keeping, the meticulous documentation of every insult, every slap, every degrading remark. I had evidence, proof of the hell I had been living in. With renewed determination, I picked myself up off the floor and made my way to the kitchen. I grabbed a bag of frozen peas from the freezer and held it against my throbbing cheek, wincing at the pain. As I sat there, icing my bruised face, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't leave, not yet. I needed more evidence, more ammunition to use against him. But this time, it wouldn't just be written words on a page. This time, I needed something more concrete, something undeniable. From that night on, I started secretly recording our interactions, capturing Clayton's explosive outbursts and vicious insults on my phone. Every time he raised his voice or his hand, I would hit record, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a dangerous game, but I was tired of living in fear. I was done being a victim. This time, I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. It was supposed to be a happy occasion, a family dinner to celebrate my younger brother's new job. But Clayton, as usual, found a way to turn it into a nightmare. From the moment we arrived at the restaurant, he was in a foul mood, snapping at the hostess and glaring at anyone who dared to make eye contact with him. I tried to diffuse the tension with small talk and forced smiles, but the dark cloud hanging over us was impossible to ignore. "So, Jake," Clayton said, turning his attention to my brother with a condescending smirk, "what kind of job did you manage to get? Flipping burgers, I assume?" Jake bristled at the insult, but he kept his cool. "Actually, I landed a position at a software company. Entry level, but it's a foot in the door." "Well, isn't that precious?" Clayton sneered, taking a swig of his beer. "Maybe one day you'll be able to afford a real job like mine." I could see the hurt flashing across Jake's face, but he remained composed. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity," he said evenly, "and I'm excited to see where it leads." Clayton let out a derisive snort, his lip curling with disdain. "If you're not careful, you'll end up like your sister, stuck in a dead-end job, slaving away for peanuts." That was the final straw. I had sat idly by, letting Clayton belittle and berate me for far too long, but I couldn't let him talk about my career, my passion, like that. "Excuse me?" I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. "I'm a nurse, Clayton. I save lives every single day. How dare you act like what I do is worthless?" For a moment, Clayton looked taken aback, as if he couldn't believe I had the audacity to talk back to him. Then his face contorted into a mask of rage, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Watch your tone with me, woman," he growled, leaning across the table. "Or do you need another lesson in respect?" The threat was clear, and a chill ran down my spine. I opened my mouth to respond, but Jake beat me to it. "Don't talk to her like that," he said, his voice low and steady. "She's your wife, not your punching bag." Clayton whipped his head around, his gaze settling on my brother like a laser sight. "This is none of your business, kid. Stay out of it before you get hurt." But Jake refused to back down. "It is my business when you're treating my sister like garbage." The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Clayton's face was flushed with fury, his nostrils flaring as he struggled to control his temper. "Let's go," he snarled, tossing a handful of bills onto the table. "This dinner is over." As we left the restaurant, Jake pulled me aside, his eyes filled with concern. "Elena, what's going on?" he asked, his voice hushed. "That's not how a husband should treat his wife." I opened my mouth to brush it off, to make excuses for Clayton's behavior like I always did. But something in Jake's gaze stopped me. For the first time, I saw the situation through his eyes, the constant belittling, the veiled threats, the simmering violence just beneath the surface. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. "It's complicated," I said, my voice wavering. "But I promise I'll explain everything. Just not here." Jake nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Whenever you're ready," he said. "I'm here for you, sis. No matter what." As we drove home in tense silence, Clayton seething in the front seat while Jake and I exchanged worried glances in the back, I knew that the time for secrets was over. If I was going to get out of this nightmare, I needed all the help I could get. And who better to have in my corner than the one person who had been looking out for me since the day I was born? The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. After the disastrous dinner, I knew I couldn't keep living in fear any longer. It was time to take action. Jake was true to his word, and he became my rock, my unwavering support system. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him the truth about the abuse I had been enduring, he didn't hesitate for a second. "We're going to get you out of this, Elena," he said, his voice steady and determined, "whatever it takes." Together, we hatched a plan. We needed undeniable evidence of Clayton's behavior, something that would hold up in court if it came to that. Audio recordings were a good start, but we needed visuals too. "What if we set up cameras around the house?" Jake suggested. "That way we can capture everything. The insults, the threats, even any physical altercations." The idea made me nervous, but I knew it was our best shot. Clayton was becoming increasingly erratic, his outbursts more frequent and more violent. Who knew how far he might go if left unchecked? We decided to keep things simple. A few discreet cameras in the main living areas, nothing too obvious that might tip Clayton off. Jake handled the technical side, ordering the equipment and setting it up while I was at work. The first few days were nerve-wracking, waiting for something to happen. Every time I heard Clayton's heavy footsteps or raised voice, my heart would start pounding, and I would brace myself for the worst. And then, it happened. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when Clayton stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, thrusting a crumpled piece of paper in my face. It was the phone bill, with a series of numbers highlighted in bold. "Who have you been calling?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Is it another man? Are you cheating on me?" "Clayton, no, it's nothing like that," I protested, trying to keep my voice steady. "Those are just calls to my brother. You know that." But he wasn't listening. In a flash, his hand lashed out, striking me across the face with such force that I stumbled backwards, clutching my stinging cheek. "Don't lie to me, you ungrateful bitch," he roared, advancing on me like a predator cornering its prey. "I work my ass off to provide for you, and this is how you repay me?" I cowered in the corner, my heart racing as he towered over me, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment I was certain he was going to hit me again, or worse. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the rage seemed to drain out of him. He straightened up, smoothing his shirt and running a hand through his hair. "Clean yourself up," he said, his voice eerily calm. "You look pathetic." And with that, he turned on his heel and left the kitchen, leaving me trembling and fighting back tears. Later that night, when I was sure Clayton was asleep, I crept into the living room and checked the camera footage. There it was, captured in high definition. The false accusation, the physical assault, the cruel insults. I felt sick to my stomach watching it unfold, but at the same time a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. This was the evidence we needed, the smoking gun that would finally bring Clayton's reign of terror to an end. From that moment on, the cameras became my silent guardians, recording every twisted scene as it played out. And with each new incident, my resolve only grew stronger. Clayton had pushed me to my breaking point, but this time, I wasn't going to break. This time, I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. The day had finally come. After weeks of planning and gathering evidence, it was time to confront Clayton and put an end to his abuse once and for all. Jake and I had gone over the plan countless times, making sure every detail was perfect. We would sit Clayton down in the living room, away from potential weapons or breakable objects, and present him with the undeniable proof of his actions. The videos, the audio recordings, the documented instances of physical and emotional assault, we had it all. A damning case against him that not even his silver tongue could talk his way out of. As I waited for Clayton to come home from work, my heart was pounding with a mix of fear, and anticipation. What if he reacted violently? What if he tried to hurt me, or worse, hurt Jake? But I pushed those thoughts aside. We had come too far to back down now. This was my chance to take back control, to break free from the cycle of abuse that had consumed my life for far too long. When Clayton finally walked through the door, I steeled myself, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "Clayton, we need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and annoyance, clearly not expecting the confrontation. "What's this about?" he asked, setting down his briefcase and loosening his tie. "Let's go into the living room," I replied, gesturing for him to follow. He rolled his eyes but complied, sinking onto the couch with a heavy sigh. "All right, let's get this over with," he grumbled. That's when Jake emerged from the hallway, a grim expression on his face. Clayton's eyes narrowed as he took in the unexpected presence of my brother. "What's he doing here?" he demanded, his voice taking on an edge of hostility. Before I could respond, Jake spoke up. "We know what you've been doing, Clayton," he said, his tone firm and unwavering. "The abuse, the violence, the control, it all stops now." Clayton's face twisted into a sneer, and he opened his mouth to unleash a torrent of insults and denials. But Jake held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother lying," he said. "We have proof." With a flick of his wrist, Jake pulled up the video footage on his laptop, the screen flickering to life with a montage of Clayton's worst moments, the shouting, the threats, the physical assaults. Clayton's eyes widened as he watched himself lash out, his face contorting with rage with each sickening blow. For a moment, he was rendered speechless, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. But the shock quickly gave way to fury. "You've been spying on me?" he roared, leaping to his feet and sending the laptop crashing to the floor. "How dare you, in my own home?" Jake remained calm, unflinching in the face of Clayton's towering rage. "We did what we had to do to protect Elena," he said, his voice steady. "And now it's over. The police are on their way." As if on cue, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. Clayton's eyes darted back and forth, his chest heaving as he realized the trap he had walked into. "You're making a big mistake," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "You won't get away with this." But his threats rang hollow, his bravado crumbling as the flashing lights of the police cars flooded the room. As the officers swarmed in, weapons drawn, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was finally happening. The nightmare was coming to an end. Clayton put up a token resistance, spitting vile insults and accusations as the officers wrestled him into handcuffs. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and for once, his silver tongue couldn't talk his way out of the consequences of his actions. As they led him away, his face twisted with impotent rage, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumphant satisfaction. For years he had controlled me, beaten me down, made me feel small and worthless. But not anymore. With Clayton's arrest, I had finally reclaimed my power, my freedom, my life. And as I watched his car disappear down the street, I knew that a new chapter was beginning, one where I would never again be a victim. The weeks following Clayton's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. But through it all, I clung to the knowledge that I had finally taken back control of my life. The evidence we had gathered, the videos, the audio recordings, the documented instances of abuse, painted a damning picture that even Clayton's high-priced lawyers couldn't refute. His attempts to discredit me and portray himself as the victim fell flat in the face of such overwhelming proof. As the court dates rolled around, I found myself steeling my nerves, determined to face my tormentor head-on. Jake was by my side every step of the way, a rock of unwavering support. When I took the stand, Clayton's eyes bored into me with a mixture of rage and desperation. His carefully cultivated mask of charm had slipped, revealing the true monster underneath. "You're ruining everything," he snarled as I delivered my testimony, recounting the years of emotional and physical abuse I had endured. "You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing without me." but his words held no power over me anymore. I met his gaze with a calm, unwavering resolve, my voice steady and strong as I laid bare the truth of our twisted relationship. In the end, the evidence was too overwhelming to ignore. Clayton was slapped with a restraining order, barring him from coming within 1,000 feet of me or my family. The judge also awarded me a substantial divorce settlement, ensuring that I would be able to start fresh without the financial burden of our shared assets weighing me down. As the verdict was read, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Justice had been served, and Clayton's reign of terror was finally over. But the true vindication came in the weeks and months that followed, as the ripple effects of his exposure began to take hold. Word of his arrest and conviction spread like wildfire through his professional circles, and the once charming salesman found himself shunned and ostracized. Clients and colleagues alike wanted nothing to do with a man who had been exposed as a violent abuser. Within weeks, he was unceremoniously fired from his high-paying job, his reputation in tatters. The expensive suits and fancy cars were gone, replaced by a humiliating reality of unemployment and social pariah status. As for me, I found myself embarking on a new chapter, one filled with possibility and promise. With the weight of Clayton's oppression finally lifted, I was free to pursue my dreams and ambitions without fear or limitation. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, channeling my newfound strength and resilience into caring for others. My colleagues remarked on the change in my demeanor, the newfound confidence and determination that radiated from me. And in my personal life, I became an advocate for victims of domestic abuse, sharing my story and offering support to those still trapped in the cycle of violence. I knew firsthand the shame and isolation that came with being a victim, and I was determined to be a beacon of hope for others struggling to find their own path to freedom. As I stood at my kitchen window one morning, sipping a steaming cup of coffee and watching the sunrise, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The woman I was a year ago, cowering in fear and drowning in self-doubt, felt like a distant memory. In her place stood a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had stared down her demons and emerged victorious. The scars of my past would never fully heal, but they served as a reminder of the strength I had found within myself, a strength that no one, not even Clayton, could ever take away. And as the warm rays of the new day washed over me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that I had the courage and resilience to face them head-on. My nightmare was over, and a new beginning awaited. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the city skyline. As I stood by the window, sipping my morning coffee, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling that had been all too rare in the past. It had been 6 months since Clayton's arrest and the subsequent legal proceedings that had finally freed me from his toxic grip. 6 months of healing, of rediscovering who I was, without the constant weight of his abuse weighing me down. The journey hadn't been easy, of course. There were still moments when the memories would come flooding back, triggering waves of anxiety and self-doubt. But with the help of a supportive therapist and the unwavering love of my family, I was learning to cope, to process the trauma in a healthy way. And as the days turned into weeks and months, I found myself embracing a newfound sense of strength and resilience. The fragile, broken woman I had once been was slowly giving way to a survivor, a fighter who had stared down her demons and emerged victorious. At work, I channeled that energy into my nursing duties, approaching each patient with a level of empathy and compassion that could only come from someone who had walked through the flames of adversity. My colleagues remarked on the change in my demeanor, the newfound confidence that seemed to radiate from me. "You're like a different person," one of the nurses remarked over coffee one day. "It's like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders." I couldn't help but smile, thinking back to the dark days when that weight had felt suffocating, crushing me beneath its oppressive force. "You have no idea," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee and allowing the warmth to spread through me. Outside of work, I had become an advocate for victims of domestic abuse, sharing my story and offering support to those still trapped in the cycle of violence. I knew firsthand the shame and isolation that came with being a victim, and I was determined to be a beacon of hope for others struggling to find their own path to freedom. Speaking at support groups and shelters, I would recount my own experiences, pulling no punches in my descriptions of Clayton's cruelty and the emotional turmoil I had endured. But I would also emphasize the importance of staying strong, of never losing sight of one's self-worth in the face of such abuse. "You are not defined by what was done to you," I would tell them, my voice ringing with conviction. "You are a survivor, a warrior, and you have the strength within you to break free." And as I looked out over the faces of those brave souls, their eyes shining with a mixture of pain and hope, I knew that my words were making a difference. They saw in me a living embodiment of what was possible, a woman who had clawed her way out of the darkness and reclaimed her life. Of course, there were still moments when the shadows of my past would creep in, threatening to overwhelm me. But I had learned to confront those demons head-on, to draw strength from the battles I had already won. I would think back to that fateful day when Clayton was led away in handcuffs, his once intimidating presence reduced to a pitiful, impotent rage. I would remember the sense of triumph that had washed over me, the knowledge that I had finally taken back control of my life. And in those moments I would square my shoulders and lift my chin, letting the memories of my hard-won victory fill me with a renewed sense of determination. Because even though the scars of my past would never fully heal, they served as a reminder of the strength I had found within myself, a strength that no one, not even Clayton, could ever take away. As the sun continued its ascent, bathing the city in a warm, golden hue, I took a deep breath and smiled. A new day was dawning, filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a brighter future. My nightmare was over, and a brand new chapter was just beginning.
My name is Freya, and I'm about to turn 25 this year. I've been happily married for 4 years, and my son, William, just celebrated his 4th birthday. When I first got married, I worked full-time, but now I balance part-time work at the same company. My husband, Henry, is 27 years older than me. Our relationship started with Henry being the one to pursue me passionately, but after we got married, I noticed a shift in his attitude, where he became more controlling. Henry has a sister, Aria, who is 23 years old. There's a bit of an age gap between them, and it seems that Henry tends to spoil her a little. Before we got married, I didn't mind Aria visiting often. I thought it was just a normal sibling bond, and I assumed they got along well. But after we tied the knot, I started noticing some changes in Aria's behavior. She began showing up at our place without calling first, expecting to be treated like a guest without ever offering to help or show any appreciation. What bothered me more was Freya's response. Instead of addressing the situation with Aria, he would expect me to accommodate her every time. Aria would come in, barely acknowledging me, and just casually say to Henry, "Hey, I'm here again," like it was completely normal. Even though I wasn't prepared to host another guest, I ended up serving dinner to her. Henry, instead of understanding the situation, would blame me out loud, saying I should have been more considerate. Aria would apologize, but it was clear she enjoyed Henry's favoritism. After dinner, while Henry and Aria sat chatting on the sofa, I was left with the leftovers. I had to make my own meal, and they didn't even acknowledge me or William. It felt like we were just there to serve them, not treated as family. One evening, as I was about to take a bath with William, Henry loudly interrupted, asking me to go buy a cake for Aria, even though it was already late. Aria insisted she wanted it right away, and Henry blamed me for the delay. Feeling pressured, I reluctantly agreed to go to the cake shop with William. As we walked, I overheard them criticizing me, calling me inconsiderate, and questioning why Henry even married me. Although William didn't understand the conversation, he could feel the tension between Henry and me. Trying to keep things light, I asked him what kind of cake he wanted, and he happily responded that he wanted one with lots of fruit. Our trip to the cake shop was full of cake talk, which for a moment helped me forget about the negative things Henry had said earlier. We made it to the shop just before closing time and managed to find the cake Aria wanted. We also bought the fruit cake that William had asked for. When we got home, I served the cakes to Henry and Aria, and then I made William's cake and took it to the dining room. The moment I placed his cake in front of him, Aria pointed at it and said she wanted that one. Before I could say anything, Henry moved William's cake in front of Arya, ignoring William's protests. Henry justified his action by saying he had paid for the cakes with his own money, so he had the right to choose for William. I couldn't hold my feelings in anymore. I told Henry how unfair it was, and in response, he threatened divorce. William, who had stopped crying, nervously grabbed my hand. After a moment, he said, "Mom, I also like cake with strawberries on it." It's really good, as he ate the cake Arya had wanted. Seeing that William was going through so much, I decided to take him away from the situation. I moved him to another room, so he could enjoy his cake peacefully. Henry apologized to Arya, saying he was sorry for being so stingy, but I held back, not wanting to argue in front of William. Watching William enjoy his cake, so happy and innocent, brought me some comfort. After we finished the cakes, we decided to take a late bath and sleep in William's bed. The next morning, when I was preparing breakfast, I realized Arya had already left. But soon, I heard William crying. To my shock, I found that his piggy bank, a gift from my father, had been broken and all the money he had saved was gone. William, who always said goodnight to his piggy bank, was heartbroken. When I asked Henry about it, he casually explained that Arya needed some money, so she had taken it from the piggy bank. Holding my crying, shaking son, I felt his pain so deeply that I couldn't help but cry with him. It hurt to see how much Henry was focused on taking care of his sister, Arya, over our own son. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I was angry and sad, so I confronted Henry, breaking my usual habit of staying silent during arguments, especially in front of William. Without saying a word, Henry walked into the bedroom and returned holding something shocking: divorce papers. I was stunned to find that Henry had been secretly hiding divorce papers, something I had no idea about. In an outburst, he shoved the papers at me and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. William, who had never cried about the issues between Henry and Arya before, seemed to have reached his breaking point. He cried non-stop since last night, and it broke my heart to see him like this. Feeling the weight of the situation, I suggested that we skip daycare for the day. To my surprise, William happily agreed, with a faint smile on his face. We spent the day together playing and bonding. William brought a picture book from the shelf, climbed onto my lap, and happily pointed to the teacher in the book, saying, "Mama, right? He looks like an angel." His little heart seemed full of patience, and in that moment, I decided to make the day special. I took a day off from work, despite the possible trouble it might cause at my job. My workplace understood the situation and kindly granted me the day off. We spent the morning at the park, playing hide and seek, having fun in the sandbox, and sliding down the slides. When we got back home for lunch, William looked sleepy. Normally, he would nap on his own, but today he fell asleep in my lap, just like when he was a baby. I had planned to use the time to do some household chores, but today felt different. Instead of cleaning, I decided to enjoy the peaceful moment and let myself be healed by the sight of William's calm, sleeping face and gentle breathing. Just as I was settling into this serene moment, I heard a noise from the front entrance. The door had opened, and since it wasn't the usual time for Henry to come home, I became suspicious. I quickly hid in the bedroom closet, holding William tightly. A voice echoed through the house, and to my surprise, it was Arya. I listened as she moved through the house, sounding frustrated as she searched for something. After a while, she made a phone call, mentioning Henry and talking about their failed search. I could hear her locking the front door as she left. Once I felt it was safe, I put William back to bed and sat down to think about what had just happened. I couldn't understand why Arya had entered our house, or what they had been looking for. Suddenly, Henry felt like a stranger to me, and I was filled with disgust and fear. Quickly, I packed some essentials for William and me and headed to the train station. We took a train to my parents' house, which was, thankfully, just 2 stations away. Although I hadn't contacted them beforehand, they could tell something was wrong just by looking at my face. They welcomed us without asking questions. Once we were settled, I told my parents everything about Henry, Arya, and the strange things that had been happening. I explained how I didn't feel safe staying at our house anymore. My mother suggested that Arya might have been searching for my belongings, possibly cash cards. As I thought about it, I recalled my past experience as a successful CEO in the handmade goods industry. When I got married, I handed over the business to trusted friends so I could focus on raising my child. Though I still worked part-time and kept in touch with the company, Henry had no idea that I was still the CEO. I remembered the divorce papers Henry had hidden, and I began to suspect that he thought I had a decent amount of savings. Although I had told him that I still received some money from the company, I had kept the details of my savings and my role as CEO private. Over time, I realized that Henry struggles with managing money and tends to spend all that he earns. Early in our marriage, Henry only gave me $200 a month for food, and even suggested that I quit my job to become a full-time housewife. But with the financial strain of raising William and barely having enough for food, I never agreed to stay home. Eventually, Henry reluctantly allowed me to work part-time. To keep him from asking for more money, I signed a post-marital property waiver through a lawyer, and since William was born, I've used my savings to cover his nursery fees and buy him clothes. Even though I only received $200 for food, I never asked Henry for more money. He must have assumed I had savings, especially considering areas a parent need for money. I also thought they might have been looking for my cash cards. I have a separate savings account for William, into which a portion of my salary is deposited every month. But I always carry my valuables with me, so they won't find anything if they were searching for it. What was even more troubling was the idea that Aria might be coming into our house when we weren't there, and Henry might be letting her. My father suggested that I store my valuables, including the cash cards, in their safe for now. As I thought about their need for money, William came over to my father, crying over his broken piggy bank and the promise he had made to save money. My father, furious about what had happened to William's piggy bank, vowed to call Henry. My mother suggested that I try to figure out what Henry and Aria were after. She pointed out that Henry might try to shift the blame to us, making the divorce more favorable for him. I decided to act calmly and find out what their true intentions were. I planned to secretly record their conversation. My father's lawyer friend also offered to help. When we returned home, I started cooking dinner while keeping my phone screen down, ready to record. It wasn't long before Henry arrived home, and to my surprise, he immediately asked about my cash cards. When I asked him about it, he gave vague answers, clearly trying to deceive me. When I remained silent, Henry grew more agitated. He demanded that I give him all of my part-time earnings for his sister. I refused and calmly explained that the money was for William's savings. In response, Henry angrily shoved the signed divorce papers toward me, declaring that I was living off his money and didn't need to save for William. He even said something that made my heart drop. He valued Aria more than our own son. Hearing this, I couldn't continue preparing the meal. I stopped, put the divorce papers in my bag, took William's hand, and walked toward the door. Henry shouted loudly, stating his serious intent for the divorce and ordering me never to come back. I responded firmly, telling him I wouldn't return to a house where a stranger could come and go freely. Once we left, Henry bombarded me with messages and calls, which I ignored. I turned off my phone and sought refuge at my parents' house. I shared the recording of our conversation and the divorce papers with them. Although I had no love or affection left for Henry, I couldn't stop worrying about how this would affect William. My parents understood my concerns and advised me to do what I felt was best. They acknowledged that a divorce could be emotionally hard on William, but they also supported my decision. As I was grappling with the decision, William told me he was hungry. My mother, seeing the distress on my face, kindly made hamburgers, his favorite dish. Overcome with emotions, tears welled up in my eyes as my mother lovingly told William that the hamburgers were made so that he and I could visit her whenever we wanted. William eagerly took a bite and joyfully exclaimed, "Grand's hamburgers. I want to eat these every day." I smiled and said, "It's because the hamburgers are filled with the love I have for you." Then, in a sweet gesture, William took a big bite of his hamburger and offered it to me. His kindness broke me, and even though I tried to stop my tears, they kept flowing. Noticing my tears, my father reassured William that they were tears of happiness, not sadness. William, in a moment of understanding, hugged me, and my father's eyes turned bright red. I realized how blessed we were to be together as a family. I looked at William and remarked, "Family is precious." Surprised, William asked, "Did Dad say that only Arya is family?" My father gently confirmed it but then asked, "Would you like to live with us as family?" With a joyful laugh, William eagerly agreed, which made everyone smile. Despite still grappling with the idea of divorce, the meal was so warm and filled with love that I finally decided to part ways with Henry. I planned to tell William about it, even though my heart felt heavy. Yet somehow, I sensed that William already understood, even without me saying a word. The situation gradually settled, and William, in his innocence, expressed a desire to live as a family. He even embraced our pet dog, affectionately calling him his younger brother, despite the dog being older than him. His sweet gesture lightened the mood, and it felt like a small moment of joy amidst the turmoil. With my decision made, preparations for the divorce began in earnest. I contacted a lawyer who was a friend of my father's, and together, we started formalizing the contract. The next day, we signed the necessary papers, and while I took in the weight of what was happening, my father and William shared comforting laughter in the other room. They were trying to lift my spirits, but I was still processing everything. As I lay in bed that night, I found myself reminiscing about my childhood, when life was simpler, and I never imagined I'd be facing such a complicated, painful decision. The following day, I checked my smartphone and found over 200 missed calls and messages from Henry. His emotional instability was evident in every message. I felt exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained, and I decided to turn off my phone to avoid hearing more. With the lawyer's help, we explained everything to my parents. We shared how Arya had accumulated a significant amount of debt due to her casino habits and shopping addiction, and how Henry had acted as her guarantor. It was becoming clearer why he had been acting so erratically. They had been planning to use my savings to cover Arya's debts, and it explained so much about his recent behavior. The lawyer confirmed that the divorce papers had already been submitted. Henry was devastated when he realized it was final, and I could hear him sobbing on the other end of the phone. It was strange, his tears didn't move me. After everything that had happened, I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for him. Despite the expectation of disagreements over child support, Henry agreed to sign a pledge to pay $340 every month for William's care. It was an amount that barely covered the essentials, but it was a small victory. Later, I received another call from Henry. His tone was different this time. There was no aggression. Instead, he calmly admitted to having manipulated me financially and explained his complex feelings toward Arya. He acknowledged his mistakes, but said nothing that could change my mind. I firmly stated that I had made my decision and wouldn't reconsider. I could hear his faint sobbing on the other end before he wished me happiness and hung up. I didn't even respond. As the call ended, I stayed strong, feeling a sense of resolve that I hadn't felt in months. I discussed my future plans with my parents. After much thought, I decided to stay with them until William grew up, giving us both the stability we needed. I resumed my role as the company president, something I had put on hold when Henry and I got married. I was determined to rebuild my life, not just for me, but for William as well. As time went on, I learned that Henry and Arya had informed their parents about the divorce and the mounting debts. The news was so shocking that it led to their disownment. For Henry, it was the final straw. His own family turned their back on him, leaving him to deal with the consequences of his actions. Looking back now, I find happiness in being with my family. We have our ups and downs, of course, but we have each other. I've come to realize that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who truly care, who lift you up when you're at your lowest, and who help you see the light at the end of the tunnel. I have William, my parents, and my own strength to carry me forward. In the end, that's what truly matters.
Did you really think you could just move your parents into our home without asking me, Ryan? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Ryan, my husband of 6 years, looked up from his laptop with a smirk I had grown to hate. "Oh, Amelia, don't be so dramatic. It's just for a while. Besides, it's not like you have a say in this." His words felt like a slap in the face. The house, A lovely two-story in a quiet suburb. Wasn't just any house. It was the home my grandparents had left me, the place where I wanted to raise our son Lucas, away from the negativity of Ryan's family. You do remember that this house is in my name, right? I shot back, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Ryan's smug look faded, replaced by a hint of uncertainty. Our 2-year-old son, Lucas, wandered into the room, oblivious to the tension. I forced a smile for him as he reached up to me with his chubby hands. I picked him up and kissed his forehead, trying to calm down. I'm not okay with this, Ryan. Your parents have never respected me or our space. Why now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan shrugged, his indifference making me even more frustrated. They're family, Amelia, you wouldn't understand. Family, the word echoed in my mind mockingly. My own family, who ran a small but beloved coffee shop in town, had always been my safe haven. They were nothing like Ryan's controlling, overbearing parents. The doorbell rang, interrupting our standoff. Through the peephole, I saw them, Ryan's parents, suitcases in tow, ready to invade our life. My heart sank. Fine, Ryan, let them in, but this isn't over, I said angrily, handing Lucas to him before opening the door. Amelia, darling, cooed Ryan's mother as she swept past me without a second glance. His father followed, a stern man who'd barely acknowledged me since our wedding day. As they made themselves comfortable in my living room, I felt a familiar sense of intrusion. This was just the beginning, I realized. But as I watched them, something inside me changed. I was done being the compliant daughter-in-law, bending to their whims. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I was ready to fight for it. The following days became a blur of unwanted changes. Ryan's mother, Elaine, had a knack for making herself overly present, which felt suffocating. She rearranged my kitchen, criticized my parenting, and acted as if our home belonged to her. Lucas shouldn't be eating that, Amelia. It's not healthy, Elaine scolded one morning as I prepared Lucas's breakfast. I held back a sharp reply, feeling her judgment like a slap. He's fine, Elaine. It's just cereal, she sighed, shaking her head. In our house, we believe in a proper diet. You really should learn. Her remarks felt like tiny jabs, wearing down my patience. Ryan, as usual, was no help, lost in his work and unaware of the growing tension. One evening, as I was putting Lucas to bed, Elaine barged into his room. He's still not sleeping through the night? You must be doing something wrong. Her words felt like a slap, making me doubt my abilities as a mother. I'm doing my best, I snapped back, unable to hide my frustration. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Clearly your best isn't good enough. Maybe if you had a real job and some structure in your life. Anger surged through me. This is my house, Elaine. You're a guest here. Remember that. Her laugh was cold. Oh dear, Ryan never mentioned how delusional you are. This is his house too, and as his mother, I have every right to be here. The next day, I reached my limit. I found Elaine in Lucas's room, going through his drawers. What do you think you're doing? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. I'm just organizing. This room is a mess, she replied, not even bothering to look at me. That's it. I want you out of my house. Now, I exclaimed, feeling a mix of fury and desperation. Elaine turned to face me, her expression one of mock surprise. Your house? Oh, sweetie, you're just the wife. This is Ryan's house too, and he wants us here. I stormed out of the room, my mind swirling with thoughts of Ryan's betrayal, Elaine's intrusion, and how they ignored my feelings. It was too much. I was tired of being pushed around, tired of my home being invaded by people who didn't respect me. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan started forming in my mind. I was going to take back control of my life, my home, and my son's future. Ryan and his parents had crossed a line, and it was time for them to realize I wouldn't be their doormat anymore. The fight was just beginning, and I was ready. A few days later, Ryan dropped a bombshell during an already tense dinner. My parents need to stay with us longer. Their house is undergoing renovations, he said casually, as if it were no big deal. I felt my anger rise. Longer? Ryan, we never talked about them staying here in the first place. He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. It's just for a few more weeks. What's the problem? The problem? Your mother treats me like I don't belong in my own home. I snapped, frustration boiling over. Elaine, overhearing us, chimed in with her usual condescending tone. Amelia, you're overreacting. We're family. You should be more understanding. That night, sleep escaped me. Their words kept replaying in my mind, fueling a growing determination. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. It was time to take a stand. The next morning, I called my brother Alex, who had always been there for me. They're taking over my life, Alex. I can't handle it anymore, I confessed, holding back tears. Alex's voice was strong and supportive. Amelia, you have to stand up for yourself. Don't let them push you around. It's your house, your rules. His words gave me the courage I needed. I decided to talk to Ryan, but this time I would be prepared. I gathered evidence of Elaine's bossy behavior, the rearranged kitchen, the disrupted routines, her constant rude comments. The day of confrontation came. I waited until Elaine and Ryan were in the living room. We need to talk now, I declared, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside me. Ryan looked up, taken aback by my tone. What's going on, Amelia? It's about your parents, Ryan. Their constant interference, their disrespect for my boundaries. It stops today, I declared, holding up my list of complaints. Elaine scoffed. This is ridiculous. We're just trying to be helpful. Helpful by undermining me all the time, by treating me like I don't matter in my own home. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Ryan squirmed. Amelia, they're my parents. We can't just ask them to leave. No, Ryan. They're guests in my home, and they've stayed too long. Either they go or I do with Lucas, I stated firmly, my determination clear. The room fell silent, my words hanging in the air. I saw Ryan's realization, but it was Elaine who spoke first. You wouldn't dare, she spat, her mask slipping. Try me. I won't regret standing up for myself, I retorted, my voice filled with determination. That night, Ryan's parents packed their bags. As they left, Elaine shot me a hateful look. You'll regret this, Amelia, she warned. But as the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the first step in taking back control of my life, and I was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The days after Elaine and her husband left were strangely quiet. Ryan's attitude towards me became cold and distant, our interactions minimal and strained. Yet, I found comfort in the peace of my home and the joyful laughter of Lucas. One evening, as Lucas played with his toys, Ryan announced, I have to go on a business trip. I'll be gone for a few weeks. His tone was indifferent, as if our troubled relationship had taken a back seat to his work. Fine, I replied sharply, barely able to hide my relief at the thought of his absence. After Ryan left, the atmosphere in the house shifted, feeling liberating. I started undoing the changes Elaine had made, each adjustment feeling like a small victory. But the real turning point came when I stumbled upon a series of emails on Ryan's laptop, left carelessly open. They revealed an affair, a betrayal that cut deeper than any of his mother's snide remarks. Anger, hurt, and a sense of betrayal swirled inside me. I knew it was time for Ryan to face the consequences. I began planning my next moves meticulously, each step aimed at making Ryan and his family answer for their deceit and manipulation. First, I secured my financial and legal position. I contacted a lawyer, explained my situation, and started the divorce proceedings. Then, I focused on the house, a symbol of my grandparents' legacy and my independence. I reached out to a real estate agent. "I want to sell the house quickly and quietly," I told her. She was surprised, but could sense the urgency in my voice. "Are you sure about this, Amelia? Selling the house is a big step," she warned. "I've never been more certain," I replied, fueled by a mix of betrayal and newfound determination. The house went on the market, and offers came in quickly. The idea of Ryan returning to find his control gone brought a bittersweet satisfaction. In the midst of all this, I leaned on my family for support. My parents were shocked by Ryan's actions and stood by me and Lucas. "We're here for you, no matter what," my father assured me. Watching Lucas play, unaffected by the chaos, I silently promised to shield his happiness. Ryan's return was inevitable, but I was no longer the same person he left. Armed with truth and a plan, I was ready to confront him and take back my life. The day Ryan returned was heavy with tension. I had played out this moment in my head countless times, imagining every possible scenario, yet my heart raced as I heard his key turn in the lock. "Amelia, I'm back," Ryan called out, his voice filling the now unfamiliar space. I stepped out from the kitchen, my stance firm. "Welcome home, Ryan. We need to talk." He glanced around, noticing the changes I'd made. "What's going on? The house looks different." I didn't falter. "I sold the house, Ryan. It's no longer ours." Disbelief washed over his face. "You did what? You can't just sell our house without telling me." "It's my house, Ryan. And after what I found out, I don't think you get to say anything anymore," I said, my voice steady but tinged with simmering anger. He scoffed, trying to regain control. "What are you talking about?" "The affair, Ryan. I know everything," I revealed, watching as his facade crumbled. His attempt to deny it was feeble and short-lived. "Amelia, it's not what you think. I think it's exactly what it looks like. You betrayed me, our family," I retorted, the hurt clear in my voice. Ryan's expression shifted from shock to anger. "You're overreacting. We can fix this." "There's no we anymore, Ryan. I've filed for divorce," I declared, handing him the papers. The ensuing conversation was a blur of accusations and denials, but I stood my ground. The man I married was gone, replaced by a stranger driven by selfish desires. As he stormed out, vowing to contest the divorce, I felt a mix of freedom and apprehension. I had taken the first step toward a new life, but the fight was far from over. In the following weeks, our situation became public. Ryan's once imposing parents were now entangled in their son's mess. Their attempts to reach out were met with silence. I had cut ties with them, focusing solely on Lucas and finalizing the divorce. The day of the court hearing arrived. Ryan looked defeated, the consequences of his actions finally sinking in. As the judge granted the divorce and custody of Lucas to me, I felt a sense of justice. Ryan's plea for reconciliation after the hearing fell on deaf ears. "You made your choice, Ryan. Now you have to live with it," I said. turning away from him for the last time. News of our divorce and Ryan's affair spread, tarnishing his reputation in relationships. His once proud and judgmental parents found themselves shunned by those who had once respected them. Walking out of the courthouse, holding Lucas's hand, I realized this wasn't just an end but a new beginning, a chance for me and my son to start fresh, free from deceit and manipulation. The future was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. Life after the divorce felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel into the light. I had regained control, not just of the house, now sold, but of my life. Lucas, unaware of the grown-up troubles, flourished in the love and stability I provided. My days were busy but fulfilling, focused on rebuilding our lives and running the coffee shop, my sanctuary. The shadow of Ryan and his parents lingered, casting a pall over my life. One day, as I was closing the shop, Ryan appeared, looking disheveled and desperate, a stark contrast to the composed man I had once known. "Amelia, please, I need to talk to you," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine for a glimmer of the compassion we once shared. I hesitated, torn by conflicting emotions. "What do you want, Ryan?" "It's about the alimony and child support," he began, his voice filled with embarrassment. "I can't afford it. I lost my job because of the scandal, and my parents, they're struggling too." His words hit me like a cold shock. "That's not my problem, Ryan. You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences." "But Amelia, I have nothing left. Please, for old time's sake," he begged, his voice breaking with despair. I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly overtaken by the memory of his betrayal. Old time's sake, those times are gone, Ryan. You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated and lied. I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me in my tracks. "I'm sorry, Amelia. Truly I am. I was a fool, and I ruined everything. Please help me." For a moment, I glimpsed the man I once loved, vulnerable and regretful. But the pain he had caused was too deep, the betrayal too raw. "I'm sorry, Ryan, but I can't help you. You need to figure this out on your own," I said firmly, closing the chapter of our shared past for good. As I walked away, leaving Ryan standing alone, I felt a sense of closure. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had led me to a place of strength and independence. Life moved on. Lucas grew, his laughter and curiosity bringing joy to our home. The coffee shop thrived, becoming a place of warmth and community. And as for me, I found contentment in simple pleasures. The aroma of fresh coffee, the sound of Lucas's giggles, and the support of loved ones. Ryan and his parents became distant memories, their legacy a reminder of the consequences of betrayal. My journey taught me resilience and the importance of standing up for oneself. As I locked the shop that evening, I looked up at the sky, its hues signaling the end of another day. I smiled, holding Lucas's hand tightly. Our future was uncertain, but it was bright. We were moving forward step by step into a new chapter of our lives.